This is the first time I'm doing this. Yeah. Alright. Let's turn this off. What's up, IG fam and YouTube fam? Welcome to my weekly live. Every Wednesday we are here, and I'm actually streaming on Instagram and I'm streaming on YouTube. And I've got another monitor here to sort of help me navigate all the things. I don't even know if y'all can hear me on YouTube. I hope so. If not, this is going to be a silent live for y'all. Let me see. How do I even get there? This is the first time I'm doing this. Huh. What's going on, Shake? I'm here being an old lady trying to understand how I'm doing this YouTube thing. So I'm going to go check on YouTube real quick to make sure I'm live because I don't know. But welcome, welcome. We're about to get started in a minute. I decided to try something new where I'm streaming from here, IG, where I normally stream. No, my camera is not there. So let's see how that. All right. No. Let's see. I'm over here trying to figure stuff out. Okay. All right. Now it's working. All right. Thank you. Thank you for being patient. All right. Sooner or later I'll fix. I don't even know this whole scenery thing. Let's see if I can switch that off. Okay. Thank God. That was not my scene. Welcome to tonight's live. I'm happy that you're here. And if you're catching it on the replay, I'm also happy that you're catching it on the replay. Sometimes people ask, Fran, what's the topic going to be? And usually I don't know what the topic's going to be because sometimes I'll put a whole thing together and then change my mind last minute. And there are times where I have like specific things that I want to share. But most of the time, I really don't know. Okay. And sometimes I just move with the spirit of things. But I figured that since we are in the call it in the fall season, I thought we'd talk about change. Fall is a reflective state. Usually, folks, I'm gonna turn down this light a little bit. There we go. Usually, folks are contemplative around this time of the year. People are slowing down, routines are getting back in order, school's back in session. So, it's really a good time for folks to start just thinking about their lives, right? This is a time where people begin to think about any changes they might want to make by the end of the year or in the upcoming year. So, so I'm going to spend some time talking about change and how that can be difficult um, and how change there's a spectrum when it comes to change. And sometimes we get really hard on ourselves for not figuring out, well, like, why aren't things changing? And there could be some specific reasons as to why that is. I also have some of my tea here. All right. And so before I get started, I do want to mention that the Thrive community is open for membership. So Thrive is a community of people committed to conquering their fears. So if you see me flipping back and forth, it's because I'm on YouTube and IG. But it's a group of people committed to conquering their fears, overcoming the resistance in their lives so that they can rise above any of their self-doubts and perceived limitations. It's an opportunity to be coached by me. And also I believe like through coaching and accountability and curated master classes that we all can thrive, right? It's really an opportunity for us to work closely together without paying thousands and thousands of dollars for coaching. And if you join as a founding member, you actually get a specially discounted rate. So take the opportunity to join a growing community from the ground up. And I'm all about like changing through depth, right? I'm not about the superficial change. And so Thrive is really an opportunity for you to go deeper. And I'd love to support you through that depth, right? Through those depths. And you can go through my link in my bio to get all the deets. Email me at hello@defineresistance.com if you want more information, and we'll go from there. So, again, the topic tonight is all about change. Okay. So, we understand at the core of our being that change is necessary, it's essential, um, and it's an essential part of our lives as we kind of go through this journey. Like it's a universal truth that sooner or later that we're all going to face moments when change isn't just a possibility, but actually a necessity, right? And sometimes it could be like a partnership that is encouraging that change, that invitation to change. Sometimes it could be a job that is encouraging you to step outside of that role and look for something better, greater. So no one is immune to this process, right? The question though is how do you approach this process and your ability to withstand that process? Because change is a continuum, it's not something that happens overnight, right? It's a whole process. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in and I'll be happy to answer those questions. But we understand that change can be very, very difficult for many of us. And it's not necessarily because we're resistant to it or we're being stubborn, although sometimes it might look like that to somebody on the outside, like that person just doesn't want to change. But it's rather because we're deeply attached to our habits and our sense of identities, maybe that comfort and stability and safety that it might bring. So that predictability we get caught up with. So usually when we're embarking on a change, it's going to shake that stability, that false sense of stability usually. It's usually going to shake that up a little bit. And so change is actually inviting you to move towards the unknown. Welcome if you're just joining us. We're just talking about change. So it's a lot deeper than somebody just refusing to change. We often think, like I said earlier, that they just don't want to change. It's usually because they might be attached to something greater than that refusal. And so those attachments can actually make that process of change incredibly intense and very difficult. And so I believe change is possible for anyone that is willing to embark on that journey, right? It's not something that is just left for somebody else. Everyone has the ability and the power to change their lives. So I want you to keep that in mind because sometimes we're like, oh, there's no hope for me. I won't be able to learn this. I'm stuck here. I'm stuck here for life, and that's not true. Um, But before we go any further, there is something that you must ask yourself. You must ask yourself this one fundamental question. Are you ready to change? And that's something I want you to keep in mind as you continue to watch this live and as we continue to do this deep dive. I had written this article a few years ago about the 9 elements of change, and you could catch that on the blog. But and this is really our basis for this conversation. And I remember someone sent me an email and was like, how helpful it was. And it was helpful because they were able to see themselves on this continuum of change. You know, what can add to a lot of the difficulties is not knowing where you are in that change process. And when you're not clear about that spectrum, you're not really sure which direction to go. So when you understand where you are on the change spectrum, you're then able to provide yourself with grace, compassion, and maybe the tools and resources and knowledge to support you based on where you are, right? Sometimes we're, again, a leaping versus crawling, right? And of course, I'm not going to go to all the 9 elements, but we're going to actually focus on 3 elements that I think are super, super important. And if you begin in this with these 3 elements, it's really a good foundation, a good springboard for you. But again, you can go on the website and on my blog and read more about it. It's called the 9 elements of change. And so again, let's recap. So, well, actually, I didn't mention it, but the 3 elements of change that if you can begin in this area, It's going to help you so much. The first one I already mentioned was, are you ready for change? Are you ready to embark that journey? It's a question that requires your utmost honesty and genuine interest, right? Because you really want to feel that there is a readiness. And then the second one is, have you identified the barriers for change, right? Um, because sometimes we go into this change without really articulating that intention. And it's really crucial for us to really understand what might be the barriers. And then the third one is, have you thought about relapse? What will relapse look like for you if you decide to do this change thing and then something sort of takes you off course? Like, what is the plan around that relapse? Again, many of us rarely actually take the time to sit down and articulate with intention what it looks like to do an overhaul of our lives. Often because it's super overwhelming, right? To think that there are multiple aspects of our lives that need to change. Usually it's not just one area, it's a few different areas, right? A few different pockets. And sometimes when it's a multiple areas, sometimes it's good to look at the domino. I call it the domino effect. Well, I got this from James Clear, Atomic Habits. So if you go and look at the domino, what is the main thing that you want to change? And if you change that thing, it'll just sort of impact and have a domino effect on everything else. But the very first thing is to look at, are you ready? Are you genuinely ready to go on that journey? Because the desire for change may exist, right? Deep down to the core, it exists. But the path to realizing that change might be unclear. So the how might be a little bit elusive, right? We might not know how. I actually did a whole YouTube video about what it really takes to change your life. So you can check that out and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're there. I believe it'll be helpful if this is where you are, if that's speaking to you. So because the change is so overwhelming, it's a lot easier to not think about it, right? Especially in details. And so we might just walk away from it, without getting really granular about it. And some people might say, yeah, I do want to change, or I'm going to change. But again, how do I do that? And I've personally encountered this challenge on numerous occasions throughout my life as I was going through my own personal transformative journey. And um, I'm currently, like, my relationship is prompting me to change in certain ways. And so here I am once again being confronted with that need for intentionality. But this is what it means to be conscious, right? And so while the term conscious is often, overused, like it's so diluted, so we can call it self-awareness, the terminology doesn't really necessarily matter. What counts is whether or not you're fully engaged and aware or asleep through the process. And that's going to make a whole difference in your ability to transform and make those changes, right? Are you ready and are you aware? Right. And sometimes we need some, and I'm going to get into this, but we'll need some things to help us bring more of that self awareness to light. So we're going to go with number one. Are you ready? There needs to be a readiness for change to actually occur. Um, if you think about readiness, you think about it like the key to the ignition, right? It kind of just, it starts everything, gets everything going. And it's usually that pivotal moment in your life where you look in the mirror at your life and into your own thoughts and you say, I am ready for something different. And you could feel that. You can literally feel it vibrating inside your body. You're not just entertaining the idea of change, but you're embracing the possibilities of that change. And you're at a space when you're ready to move beyond your current state, right? To break free from the constraints of familiarity, and to step into that unknown. And you're willing to do that. You're saying that I may not know what's going to happen, right? But I'm committed to the process. And you're in a space where you are actually open to confronting all of the things that you might face, regardless of how crappy it may make you feel, regardless of how this change may look to others. But you're in that fed up stage. And usually when you go on a change, a lot of people might not want you to change. And I've said this before, but a lot of people might have benefited from the way that you have been, the way that you are, right? They benefited from that version of you. So being able to embrace that change while everybody's like, "Oh, you different. Oh, you change," and you're like, "Yeah, that's kind of like the plan. That's the that's the whole goal, right?" And so this readiness isn't something that's passive. It's very active, because you're literally declaring your autonomy. You're taking the reins to literally reshape your life, right? You're literally reclaiming that power back. And I always have some self-reflective questions for you. So hopefully you have something to write down, or in your notes. But if you're at the readiness stage, then here are four self-reflective questions that you can actually ask yourself to get the ball rolling. All right. So the first question is, what specific aspects of my life am I dissatisfied with, right? Or feel that that needs to change. I really sit down on that. And sometimes we want to, like I said, there could be multiple aspects of your life that you want to change, but just pick one. Because we don't need to do everything all at once. We really want to pace ourselves and honor our pace and honor our own progress. And then the next question is, why do I feel change is necessary at this point in my life? What has prompted this desire to transform? And the reason why this question is so important is because you want to make sure that this readiness for change isn't coming from outside, not coming from people trying to pressure you, not coming from the external world. Because if it isn't coming from you, it's inauthentic, right? And so that change will not last, and you won't feel committed to the process. So make sure it's not someone else's, voice in your head. Make sure it's not someone else telling you how to do this thing, that you need to do this thing at this time, at this deadline. Make sure it is your own voice. All right. So that's number two. So again, what specific aspects of my life am I dissatisfied with or feel the need to change? That's number one. Number two, why do I feel that change is necessary at this point in my life? What has prompted this desire for transformation? Okay. And then number three is, what are my greatest fears or concerns about going on this journey of change? This is a powerful question because we really want to identify the fears. Some of us, we try to avoid or thinking about our fears when this is such a great opportunity to explore them, right? To think about them, because the only way fear can control you is if they're hidden in the shadows, right? If we can't see them, if we don't identify them, that's how they grow in power. So when fears are front and center, they really have a harder time manipulating our thoughts and behaviors and distorting our reality. Okay, so confront those fears in the very beginning, and see how they change over time. And the last question to ask yourself is like, how do I envision my life once this change has taken place? And that could be very hard for folks who are knee deep in whatever it is that they're going through. They haven't given themselves permission to dream, haven't given themselves permission to imagine it, to use their imagination. And so ask yourself, what will be different and how will it impact my overall well being? It's really important to look at your life on that other side of that change. Because sometimes we want to change something, but like, why? What difference would it make in your life? Take a moment to reflect on that, right? And sit in that. Use your imagination to envision what that would look like and what would it feel like. Fall into that feeling, right? And let that be a point of resonance for you. Because readiness is not enough. It's just not. It's just the beginning. Welcome if you're just joining us. I'm just talking about change and the readiness to change, and talking about the three most important elements to get started on this change journey, just to get yourself started. So, for example, I think I'll talk about that example later. But part of this readiness is asking yourself this question: do I have the resources and the tools to make this change in my life? Because we might be ready, but we may not have the tools, right? So we don't want to set ourselves up for for not being able to make this change happen. I was going to say failure, but there's no such thing as failure. You know, this matrix language just gets to me because I feel like I can never say anything because it's just it's stuck in the matrix. And what I mean by that is just like there's always double meaning with words in the English language, and it just gets to me. All right. So, do I have the tools and the resources to make this change? If you think about it, let's say, you want to explore a new city, you want to travel and all that stuff. You packed your bags, so you're ready to roll, you know what I'm saying? But you ain't got a map, like you don't have the GPS, like you don't know where you're going. You don't even have any knowledge of the city. That's your resources and knowledge, right? The bags is your readiness, right? And so what happens when you step on those streets? You'll end up probably getting lost and wandering aimlessly. It's kind of like a metaphor for life, right? We might be ready to change, but we don't have all the tools and knowledge we need. So we sort of just kind of like go through the dark, stumble and trying to figure everything out. And I know when I jumped on my path to change my life, I talk about it often, but I went to Southeast Asia. I bought a one-way ticket. I went to Southeast Asia. I was so incredibly lost, right? And I brought all of my baggage with me overseas. I was like, I'm out of here, guys. I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to see nobody. I'm out of here. But I learned that wherever you go, there you are. And so if you see me going from screen to screen, it's because I'm on YouTube as well live. And so when I decided to go on that journey, I didn't have a lot of support. And I kind of did it in stealth mode. And I didn't have too many people to talk to about it. What's going on? Welcome. If you're just joining us, we're talking about change. And so, before I left, I was depressed, anxious, and isolated. Well, all of that amplified and magnified when I was overseas because now I couldn't speak the language. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't know anyone else who was traveling like that. And I didn't have a roadmap to like, I didn't know what I was doing. Right. So what I did was I read every book that I could read. I started to do a lot of research to see like, okay, who can I talk to about this? Got myself a therapist, which I left when I went overseas. I stopped seeing her. I went to see some shamans. I started talking to other people who were on a similar journey. And I consumed as much of knowledge that I could as I was sort of developing myself. And I found myself beginning to understand even the lingo, even as I'm clinically trained as a therapist, but there's a lot of things I did not learn in grad school. Okay. There's a lot of things I didn't learn. I didn't learn nothing about no inner child work. I didn't learn nothing about shadow work. And so I started to understand some of this lingo, but I didn't know how to apply a lot of it because I've been isolated. And I don't know if anybody saw my stories, but I said something about like, the first mirror is the mirror that you see yourself. And then the next mirror is the people. People will mirror to you what it is that you need to change and what are the things that still needs to change. It can be very difficult, especially if you're coming from a place of deep trauma, but like you'll know if you've changed or, got better at something when you begin to interact with other people because people are mirrors. It will show you real quick whether or not you still got some healing to do, right? So I haven't been able to apply a lot of it. So this leads me to ask, as part of this readiness to change, do you have the resources that you need? And what are those resources? Do you possess the knowledge required to navigate this path, right? And what are the knowledge that you need? So following my interactions with some of the shamans and also my therapist at the time, what truly transformed a lot of my journey was having a mentor and a supportive community. I met my mentor in 2020. I went all in. She had a community. I went all in. I went to every group. I went to every meeting. I was at every conversation. I was asking all the questions. And I needed that space so much because I was like, oh, these are my people. These are my people. And it felt very affirming to be able to be in that space because there was no one else I could talk to about that. And that was a serious game changer for me. What's going on, Dara? Serious, serious game changer. And I found myself surrounded by folks who were walking that conscious path, and had already done a significant amount of inner work. It was very different to be around people who had done inner work. All my life, I've never been around people like that. I had therapist friends. I was in a big community, but we all ain't doing no work. You know what I'm saying? So it really changed the game for me because I could actually have those kinds of conversations about what was going on inside of me that I never could have in the past. And then I met my partner, who I'm deeply grateful for because she basically mirrored everything that I thought, I thought I had it down pat. You know what I'm saying? I came in, I was like, yeah, I did all this healing work. I know all this lingo. And then boom, I was like, oh, all this stuff started coming up. All this inner child stuff started coming up. All this shadow stuff started coming up. And I was like, oh, I still got some stuff to do. And sometimes people think like, oh man, this is so much work. I got so much work to do. And it's not, when you approach it like a heavy burden, it makes it even more difficult to navigate. This was just all feedback. And I ain't gonna lie, like in the beginning, I was like, man, I'm done. I'm tired of all this stuff, right? I'm tired of having to have these conversations over and over again. But once I stopped resisting and fighting with that, I was like, okay, what what is it that I need to learn? So that partnership really exemplified what it meant to be in a conscious relationship, and that could be friendship, that could be your family. We have lots of opportunities where we can actually get into conscious relationships with other people. Oh, my nose is itchy. I think it's my allergies, but so for the first time that I was able to experience a relationship that was free from toxicity. Um, and that was a big adjustment for me because I was used to all the melodrama, the neuroses. I was used to all of that. And perhaps like me, some of you may benefit from surrounding yourselves with individuals who can actually reflect to you healthy relationship dynamics, right? So that you can see the contrast between your current environment and what is possible. So don't underestimate the power of a community, wherever it is, whatever you feel called towards. And so when we talk about the readiness for change, is that desire really there? Okay. Then we talk about the resources. What do I need on this path to help make this change long lasting? What mentors do I need? What guides? What communities can I join? What relationships do I need to embrace to help this come to light? What books, what courses, what are the things that I can get involved in? Because when you join even like courses, whatever it is, usually like a community component. Obviously, do your due diligence because we're in like information overload right now, right? So not everyone is, you know. Anyway, I digress. Just make sure you do your due diligence, right? Because the knowledge begins to become the roadmap. And these are just tools to help you begin to build a foundation for yourself as you go through the change process, right? So I got some more self-reflective questions for you. You can always come back to the replay and write some of these questions down, but these are very important because again, people are like, I'm going to change. And then you just go without actually having some sort of roadmap, right? And then you get frustrated because nothing is changing, nothing's different. People around you are getting frustrated because they're like, wait, I thought you said you were going to do something different. And then it just wreaks havoc, right? So the first question to ask yourself as you are moving past the readiness stage is like, how are you actively working to fill any of the skill gaps that might be hindering your progress? That can bridge the gap toward realizing the change that you desire. And what I mean by skill gap is, I'll get to that later, but like essentially what is it that you need to learn, right? Do you need to learn how to better communicate? What does that look like to better communicate? Yeah, that's true, Beauty. Beauty says, yeah, beware. Most people are regurgitating what they heard with not real understanding. Yeah. Make sure whoever that you choose is embodying the thing that you're searching to embody yourself. Right. So that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah. Do you need to learn how to communicate better? Do you need to learn how to develop a relationship with your inner child? That's everything. I say, listen, you know, whether or not you can join a community, whatever, do inner child work. Find everything that you can about inner child work. Do that, and that will get you halfway, literally halfway there. And then, of course, you need to practice some of that stuff after you learned it, right? Do you need to learn how to do shadow work? Some people don't really know what shadow work is. They kind of have a gist, they've heard about it. What does that look like to do shadow work? Right? So these are all things that you can actually begin to pick up, begin to do on your own, right? Understand that change is a very active process. It's not passive. But I also want to make sure you know it's also not obsessive either, because we can get caught up in that to the point where we're taking a bunch of courses, we're going through a lot of mentorship programs, but we're not integrating any of the things that we're learning, right? We can get caught up in that work. And I did a post about this actually on Instagram about not obsessing over the tools, because we can do that as well. Because when we obsess over the tools, once we do one tool, we'll do another tool. We'll try to find another tool. We're like, okay, I did this one. I'm gonna try this one. And it becomes that shiny red object. Because if that doesn't work, or if we're not satisfied with that tool, then we're gonna go to the next one. What's going on, Lily? And then we keep thinking it's the tool. And it's not the tool. Okay. When you find yourself obsessing over the tool, then the question is, what are the things that are pulling me away in this moment? What is it that I'm trying to improve? What's pulling me away from the thing that I'm really trying to do? Right? So, to sum that part up, the readiness is the desire, coupled with the tools, the resources, the knowledge, the support that you might need to undergo some of that change. Okay. And then number two, now I said we have three. So we're in number two now. Have you identified the barriers for change? This is like crucial. And it's so important to do an audit of your life to see where there'll be anything that might prevent you from actually going through this process. What's going to block this change? When I started my weight loss journey many moons ago, if you heard me say this story, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it again, but it's such a great illustration. I can't help myself. Um, what might interrupt this change for me? And when I started on this journey, it was wild because I was totally fed up, and I was like, nah. That readiness was like heavy. It was, if the pull was so magnetic, I almost got tunnel vision because it was all that I could think about. And so I remember coming in, I made the decision, boom. It was like a morning. I looked at myself. That same day I made the decision, boom. And I opened up all the cabinet doors. I threw away everything. I threw away all the food, even the food that wasn't open. I threw everything away because I knew that would be a barrier for me. I opened the fridge, threw everything away. I'm telling you, the fridge was empty. My son was confused. He's like, what's going on here? Beauty says the obsession becomes an endless path of trying to fix ourselves. The exhaustion is real. Yeah. But there's really nothing to fix, right? Because when you come from the and I did a video about this on YouTube, but like when you come from the place of fixing, you're saying that something is wrong. Nothing is technically wrong, right? You're showing up with all your parts, all your pieces. And if you think that it's like, because when you come with the perspective of fix, that means when I fix, I'm done. But when you embrace this as a marathon, when you embrace this as a journey, right? Almost like a plant that you must water every day, to nurture every day. When you come from that nurturing place, you're not so exhausted. And that takes practice, right? But yeah, when I was going through throwing away all my food, my son's all confused, throwing away stuff I just bought, stuff that wasn't open. And then I had to reconstruct my whole work environment. You know, I was part of the lunch bunch. Y'all know, everyone has a lunch bunch at work. Usually know all the good restaurants, all the good. Oh, I almost dropped my mic. I actually did. We all have a lunch bunch at work, right? All the good places to eat. I hid. It's like, don't even look at me. Say, pass by. Don't even look at me. You come to lunch? Nah, I'm gonna sit here and eat this salad. I ate some dry ass salad with some tuna. um, but I knew if I didn't do that, I would get sucked back into those poor eating habits. So when you're on this path, you have to really identify what would be the barriers to this path. So, for example, if you want to move away from toxic relationships, what are some of the barriers? What are the things that might draw you into back into that kind of relationship? Or some of the red flags that you overlooked that could be a barrier to this process? And really examine that and really get to know those barriers, because they can be real subtle. They can be real subtle. And if we're not mindful, we're going to get sucked right back into old habits. So change requires you to identify any barriers that are going to get in the way of that change. And that part of the process is sitting down and reflecting. And here's some things that you can think about. I got you. Here's some things that you could think about. To write this down, or again, come back to the replay and begin to list them. You might hear some things in the background. This is an active household, guys. I usually say there's some traffic coming in. But the first thing to think about is, when you're sitting down and reflecting on this process, to think about any barriers that might be coming up, is what are your own thoughts, patterns, habits, and behaviors that could stand in the way of that change. And what I mean by that is the limiting beliefs, the self-doubt, any of that stuff that needs to be addressed. What are the emotional barriers? Explore your emotions regarding that desire to change. What are the fears? We talked about that earlier. What are the anxieties? What are some of the past traumas that need addressing before you move forward? Sometimes we just need to highlight them so that we can notice them when they actually come up. And next thing is the external factors. This is so important. Your environment is everything. Assess your external environment. There are some things you might have to eliminate, remove, add, subtract, multiply, divide. No, I'm kidding. Are there external influences, toxic relationships, demanding jobs, negative living situations that could really impact this process for you? And it could be hard to kind of look at that, right? Because we get attached to so many different things. But you have to ask yourself, how important is this change to you? What will it take? And next thing is to evaluate your social circle. I told you earlier, I had to, back away from the lunch bunch. Do an audit of your social circle. Are there people around you who are supportive of this change? Are there individuals who might discourage you or distract you from this change? I always say in the beginning, this healing journey does require a bit of isolation, but then eventually you'll find your tribe. But you gotta move people. Excuse me. You gotta move them out the way. And that could be hard to have those hard conversations with people you've been connected to a long time. But it could be necessary, at least. Sometimes it could be temporary. I mean, but by the time you come back, you're a totally different person, and so are they. Sometimes they might be the same, but you become a totally different person. But you come with different wisdom and different insights that allow you to manage that relationship moving forward. So sometimes it's not a total loss, and loss in a sense mean like disconnection. All right, I hope this has been helpful so far. We're down to number 3. This is the last one, and then we're going to wrap things up. Um, the last one is relapse. Relapse is a part of change. Okay. And I never thought about relapse as being a part of change before. There's this podcast that I host called Turning Points Navigating Mental Health. And in season 2, I interviewed this guy. I can't remember his name, but he did a lot of addiction work, and he was also in recovery himself. And he told me that relapse is part of change. And I was like, it is, isn't it? I was like, I never thought of it that way. And you see this, individuals recovering from addiction are really taught and prepared for the possibility of relapse. And this is so important because it really allows them to navigate this stage with resilience and self compassion. So many of you really get hard on yourselves because you're finding yourself slipping back into old habits. And that's part of it. Even after I lost all that weight, I gained like 30 pounds back and then lost it again. So relapse is a natural part of the process. It's usually inevitable. It will happen, maybe once, but it doesn't mean that it's failure, which failure doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that all of your hard work is for naught. Basically means that you're back at square one and all that hard work is out the window. This is a typical element in the journey. And relapse is feedback, right? We use it as feedback and we need to treat it that way. It's an opportunity for you to learn from the relapse. Like, okay, what was going on with me when that happened? Why did it happen? So it's an opportunity for you to examine some of those triggers that led to you reverting back to old behaviors. It's an opportunity for you to get clear on what those triggers are, to get the insights, right, into specific challenges that you might face along the journey. And in the process, you put in some safeguards, right, so that you can find better ways to cope or address some of those triggers so that you can prevent them moving forward. Relapse is really a beautiful opportunity to understand yourself at a much deeper level. You know, I always say growth can only happen through depth. We're not down for the superficial change. Okay. And I always say that when you look at the relapse, what's important is to look at the amount of time in between the relapse, the space in between it, because, did it go week to week, every month, every other month, once a year? Depending on obviously what the change in behavior is, this could matter, right? I relapsed, but man, it's been a couple of weeks, right? It's been a couple of months. Celebrate that, right? The part of change is celebrating those small incremental changes, okay? And obviously, there are some changes in our lives that really require complete and pure abstinence. But this reframe could be very helpful as you go through the change process. So, relapse again helps you develop better ways to, manage certain things, um, and that will help you. That will help you lengthen or create long-lasting change. Essentially, right? It's just a stepping stone. Okay. Now, I don't know if there's any questions. Let me just take a look in the chat. No questions. I've been running my mouth for a long time. Thank you, IG, for thank you all for watching on IG and YouTube. I hope it worked. I don't even know if it went through. This first time I live stream on YouTube, so hopefully y'all can hear what I said. But again, would love for you to join the community, whether it's the Thrive newsletter or the Thrive membership community. But stay in touch, right? Because a lot happens offline, and would love for you to stay connected with me and with each other. Oh, somebody has a question. What if the change is simple to someone on the outside, but the trauma part seems big? Okay, so um, I guess the question is, who does the change matter to the most? Because here's the thing, people on the outside, we gotta be very mindful. The reason we gotta be mindful because everyone has their own interpretation and everyone has their own projection. And the only thing that matters is you. That's the only thing that matters. Your own interpretation, how you feel about it, what you think, believe, that's all that matters. Everyone has an opinion about something. But the question is, and I said this to my client today, what it got to do with you? Okay. If the change matters to you, And that's all that matters. Honor your own pace on this process. Some people are going to want to rush you through your change. And granted, if you're in a relationship and they've been dealing with something with you for a while, they might not be as patient. So there might be this pressure of a deadline to change at a certain time or by a certain time frame, right? This happens in relationships. And there could be a time where, that person might not be willing to wait around for that. And that's part of the process because the person gets to decide whether or not they're willing to be a part of that experience. They have the right to make that decision. But as long as you honor your own pace and honor your own progress and respect it. And if that person decides to leave in your mind what feels prematurely, so be it. This is an opportunity for you to learn from that experience. And sometimes these things are temporary. So as much as we sometimes give our energy, we often give ourselves so much, give our energy to so many things that are impermanent, that are temporary. We're caught up in it. Sometimes that relationship needed the space, and then y'all can come back at a later date and time. If the trauma feels big to you, then work out that trauma at your own pace with whomever you trust, or you feel supported by, and don't rush the process for anybody. You can't really rush it anyway, right? I mean, there are different things and modalities that you can do that you can immerse yourself in certain experiences. Y'all know I talk about plant medicines all the time. Those are available, right? But do what works for you. That's a great question, actually. If somebody can't really understand like what they can't see it from your perspective, we can't necessarily make them see it from our perspective, right? We just need to honor our own. We can hear feedback if the feedback feels reasonable to us. Wait, your therapist? Now I'm all in your business. I hope your therapist didn't say that to you, Lord. I hope not. Oh Lord, you ain't gotta say here, but I hope I wasn't your therapist. Remember, y'all, therapists are people too. I had a whole podcast about therapists are people too. So when you feel that red flag from a therapist, honor that feeling and pivot. Okay. If there are no more questions, let me check here. I hope there were no questions on YouTube because I don't know how to use the chat on this thing. So, but thank you for watching and thank you for engaging with me. If you have any more questions, I'm probably gonna do another live on Sunday. I think maybe somebody asked me a question about my story, and I feel like not too many people know my story, so I might spend some time talking about like how did this all develop. So thank you for watching here on YouTube as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, join the Thrive newsletter or the community, and I will see you on the other side of wholeness. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye bye.